SED type 3. So how SED type 3 we are going to implement slowly changing dimension type 3. And SED type 3 is something that which will store the partial history. It will store the previous value as well as the current value. It will store basically the previous and the current value which it is there for all the attributes. So what does it says? Whenever a record is not existing, it's a very simple thing. Whenever a record is not existing, so basically you're going to insert the data into it. So let's say whenever a record is existing, when record is existing, and there is a change in the current attribute, you're going to compare the current attribute with the source attribute. Whenever there is a change in current attributes to the source, then you are going to update the data. So it's basically, what do you update? You will move the current value to the previous value, and the source value will come and sit in the current value attribute. New value will come and sit. So this is your SED type 3. So basically we are going to take the same example. So if you see the source value, source is going to be SED input, and the target I'm going to use that is your dim supplier 3. There is a target table, so that is your dim supplier 3 that we are going to use. So let me just log in and then try to import from here. So let's say I want to log in here. So you have March 9:30 p.m. EST. So source is already there, so you don't need to import. It's the same source. And I need to import the target table. So import from database. So let's say I have a target table. Observe the structure of the table. So let's say dim supplier 3, and click on OK. If you see, we had two attributes, right? So one is your supplier name, another is your supplier state. So for capturing both of them, I have a current value and the previous value, and for a supplier name as well, I have a current value and the previous value. So this is how the structure of the table is going to be for your SED type 3. So which is for maintaining the partial history. And now let me start with the mapping. So go to the mapping tab, click on create. So which I call it as m underscore dim supplier 3. So click on OK. And source is going to be, let's say, SED input, drag and drop. So just like all your other mappings which you have implemented, you need to create a lookup to determine whether the table is, record is existing or not. So if you create lookup dim supplier 3, let's say if you would like to create it on this one, I don't know, somebody has created this 222. Okay, I have created, I guess. Yeah. Dim supplier 3. So click on OK. Now I'm going to add the supplier code to determine whether the record is existing or not. So this is going to be an input. This is going to be the logical unique column to determine whether the record is existing or not. See, in few cases, in few of the dimensions, you might have to use multiple columns to determine the uniqueness. So that time you pass multiple columns and then add an additional condition to match the data. So when you go to this, supplier code is equal to supplier code input, and probably I don't require them. And even for comparing the attribute, always I'll compare the current attribute with the source. I don't need the previous columns as well. So I'll even delete these previous values also because I don't need them. So I'm just deleting. So now, yes, it's like an AND condition if you add here. It's an AND. Always it's going to be an AND. Yes. So it's like an AND condition. which will match. So we cannot actually keep an OR here. Logical operator choosing is not there. Now we have defined, so let me move on to create an expression transformation, which you call it as expression underscore detect changes. Let's say I need to pull these columns, so basically I require all these columns and I suffix them with a underscore LKP. So current supplier name is also going to be an LKP. Let's say the current supplier state is going to be in this one. So all of them I'm going to use it as an input because I don't want them as an output as well. So now click on, pull all these columns from the source. So from the source, whatever you're actually pulling, so suffix them with a underscore src, and this also with the underscore src to find out whether there is an attribute change or not. So you just use an MD5. See here, it's a tricky thing. Basically, if there is no okay, so let's not discuss about it, and while testing it we'll check. Okay, let me go with a normal process here. So I'll go with a calculating of vSource MD5. So change the string value as 1000, and this is going to be an variable port, and another variable port is going to be the VLOOKUP MD5 value. So let's say the source MD5 is going to be, you'll compute the value of this. So let's say the ports tab, and supplier name source, which you're going to concatenate with the supplier state source. And you can also use the other one. It's going to be the MD5 value of all the lookup current attributes. Okay, so current supplier name lookup concatenated with the current supplier state. So if these current values are different, then we are going to define this. So just apply. Here I'm going to, as usual, I'm going to define two columns. So one is going to be the change flag, and this is going to be an output port, and another is called as an insert flag. So this is also going to be an output port. So what is the difference? Insert flag, whenever a lookup returns a null value, I'll insert it. So if is null of supplier code lookup, is null of supplier code lookup, then I'm going to set the flag as Y, else I'm going to set the flag as no. So just validate it, expression parsed successfully. And the change flag is going to be, so if not is null of supplier code lookup, not is null of supplier code lookup, and if the source MD5 value is not equal to VLOOKUP MD5, then I'm going to set the flag as Y, else I'm going to set the flag as no. So try to validate the data, supplier code lookup. Now, so what it is going to be, so whenever an insert flag is set to Y, I do the insert, and whenever the change flag is set to Y, I do a update. So now and we also need another column, so that is your for adding the current date, and then this is going to be a date time. It's an output port. I want to stamp it as session start time. So just apply and click on OK. Now in order to divide the data into two, so this one is basically, it's going to be a router transformation. So go to transformation tab, click on create, select the router, so which I call it as RTR underscore dim supplier 3. So click on create and then done. So supplier code, supplier state, all these, so just drag and drop. And here, based on the insert and change flag, you're going to divide the data into two groups. So this is an insert, and this is going to be an update. So here the filter condition is going to be the insert flag is equal to Y. Then I'll assign all the records to insert, and whenever you set this change flag is equal to Y, then I'm going to update it. So just use and then do that. Okay, right. So now here, as usual, like to handle the insert update logic, I need a two update strategy transformations, one for an insert, another for an update. So let's say this is going to be the DD insert, and next this is going to be the DD update. DD update. So let's say supplier code, supplier name, and supplier state, and the current date. We just go here and supplier code. Okay. See here, what actually I missed is I need these two columns as well. So if you see the current supplier state and the current supplier name, because your current value will go to the previous value and your new value will come and sit over there. So I need these columns as well. So I'm adding these columns to the router. Okay. Now when you are updating it, I need all the columns. Basically you need a supplier code source, these values, and at the same time you also need these values as well. Okay, I'll tell you like how it works. So remove the output port, maybe if you just want to keep it proper with the naming convention and all those. So remove an output port, all those. Now I'm going to load the data into the target. So it's going to be the dim supplier 3. So you just drag and drop twice. So twice. So dim supplier 3 and then the dim supplier 3. So what is there is basically for a source, whenever you're inserting for a first time, so your previous value is going to be null, right? So you don't have a previous value when you're adding a record. So your supplier code will go and sit here, and the supplier name will go to the current supplier state, and supplier state source also will go and sit in this. And you have a created date and current date, that is your last updated date. And now here, concentrate here. Okay, so when you are actually updating your previous value, previous value should be updated with the current value, and the new value will go and sit in the current one. So let's say supplier code, supplier name source is going to be the current supplier name, all right, and supplier state source is going to be the current supplier state. So what is the previous value when you're updating? So it's going to be the current supplier name will go to previous supplier name, and current supplier state will go to the previous supplier state. And for a last updated date, you're going to use this column. You're not going to update the created date. So it's only the difference which you have to take it. Now save it. So what you're doing, it's more or less similar like in your SCD type 1, except that pulling these two columns and then updating it. So this is your SCD type 3. So if you see, first we are verifying whether it is existing or not. Then we are checking whether there is a change in the attributes or not. And then we are updating based on the update strategy transformation. All right. So let's test this, and let me generate a workflow using a wizard. I would like to generate a workflow with a reusable session. So let's say I'll assign all the connections at the workflow level. So I'm not changing anything here. And then let's say I want to modify my workflow name. So I'm just changing it. You can modify anything here, and then click on next and finish it. So let me log into the workflow manager, and basically this. So we have this one, let's say March 2015, 9:30 p.m. EST. So we have a dim supplier 3. So just go and assign the connection. Since it is a reusable session, I'll assign the connections from the task developer. Let me clear all of them and then pull the dim supplier 3. So edit it, go to the mapping tab. So it's going to be the OLTP source. So click on OK, and dim supplier 3, which is going to be the target underscore Karthik, and click on OK. Dim supplier 3, it's again going to be the target underscore Karthik. So it's going to be the normal mode, and this is also going to be the so apply the changes and click on OK. So save it. Now we are done with it. Let me just check what data I have in my target. So probably there will be no data, I guess. So dim supplier 3. So there is no data. So what happens for a first time when you run the workflow? It's going to be all the inserts, and all the previous attributes is going to be null. So because you're not updating, you're not inserting any value. If you check, you have not connected the previous values here, so it's going to be null. So let me run the workflow and then see how the insert logic works here. So it's going to be dim supplier 3, and what it is, let's say March. Let me get the previous runs, and you have a dim supplier 3. So this is going to be, so 15 out of 15 records have been succeeded and none of the record got updated. So let's check how it is going to be, how the data is populated here. So if you see, all the previous attributes are null, you don't have anything, and current attributes have been added, and your created date and the last updated date is also being populated appropriately. Now what I do, I'll go and update the data in the source. So it's going to be an update. So update SCD underscore input. Let's say set. Let's say what I do is I'll change the supplier state for ABC. From KA, I'll change it to KL. Okay. So let's update set supplier state. So which is going to be, let's say KL, where supplier code is equal to ABC. Supplier code is equal to ABC. I'm updating the supplier and commit the data. See, whenever you're doing, you commit the data. Okay. Now what should happen for a ABC supplier? Your current supplier state should go to previous supplier, and let's see now what difference that you find when you do the data. So let me try and run the workflow. So obviously only one record should get updated, right? One record should get updated. So now when you run it, let's see, only one record got updated. So, and the interesting thing is that it's KL, it is updated, but still your previous supplier name is also updated with the current supplier name. Even though there is no change in the previous supplier name, it has been updated. See, here if you have to handle this approach, definitely it is going to be a complex scenario. If you have to handle this, see, it doesn't going to make much difference here. If you think in terms of a business, yes, it makes a difference. So what you have to do in that case is that you have to basically take care of individual updates for each and every record. So you need to actually determine if there is a change in the supplier name, go and update the supplier name. If there is a change in the supplier state, go and update only the supplier state. Likewise, you need to have, maybe if you have 10 columns, you need to have 10 update strategy transformations to determine that. So basically here the implementation what you have done, there is a disadvantage. So even though there is a change only in the supplier state, it has updated the previous supplier name also with this. So in this case, you probably have to handle to overcome this kind of a disadvantage. It's only the way to determine is you have to take care of a individual updates what you see. So this is more about the SCD type 3, how we handle. See, sometimes what we also do is whenever you run for a first time, right? So we stamp both the current and previous supplier name same. So in that case, for your business, it doesn't make much difference. So if you actually keep this as a null value and then the current supplier name as this, then in that case, for someone who is just looking at the data, it doesn't look good, and maybe your business users might raise a concern. So in order to handle this, what I'm saying is you need to go by an individual update for each and every column by using the different update strategy transformation and then handle it. I'm not going in detail about it, like how you have to take care of it. So that's a one observation that which you can take from this implementation of your slowly changing dimension type 3. So this is how it will handle the insert and the update logic. So we are going to schedule this in the real time, and whenever there is a change in your OLTP system, it will take care of an insert and update automatically. So even if you see the last updated date and then this is also being modified. So this is more about slowly changing dimension type 3, how SCD type 3 will be implemented. So if you have any questions, probably you can go ahead now. On SCD type 3. Okay. So the next one, we are done with all these. So we have seen, is there an undo feature? In the mapping level you don't have, but there is an option called as revert to saved. So whenever you save something and you just want to do an undo thing, so you can go by this undo revert to saved. So whatever the last saved version, it will take you. But suppose let's say I have deleted this column, I cannot undo that change. Let's say you have done it and you applied the change and you saved it, and if I just want to undo the change in the individual transformation, you can't do that. So before saving also, see, once you apply the change, it's gone. So even if you save or without save, it's gone already. So if you don't apply, then there is a chance you can use a cancel button and then you can get that. There is no undo feature. I mean, like at the transformation level, maybe whenever you want to go to last saved version, so it's something like this. Let's say I have deleted, now save it. If I want to go back to the last, oops, gone, that is gone. If I have to go back to the last saved version, then probably no. It's only, what about this? Yeah, this only the option is revert to saved option. So other than that, you don't have any version. Yes, we'll talk about versioning, how the versioning happens, probably in the next example after this. We'll talk about the versioning, how versioning will be maintained in Informatica and all those things. All right. So the next thing that we are going to talk about is the how to generate the sequence value without using a sequence generator. I think versioning will come in the next example. Yes. So before we forget about the surrogate primary key, so we'll try to understand what is an alternative method that you can actually implement without using a sequence generator. See, yesterday when we have populated a surrogate primary key, we did understand that there are a disadvantage using a sequence generator, and it also causes a lot of performance issue when you are loading a millions and millions of records. So in that case, is there any alternative which I can actually implement and which I can achieve the better way of handling the generating the surrogate primary key method? So this is a very best method for generating a surrogate primary key, whether you are generating for a fact table or whether you are generating for a dimension table, any table, wherever you are generating a surrogate primary key, this is the very best method, and this is a reusable method. You don't need to create for each and every mapping. It's going to be the reusable method. So we'll understand how can we create a reusable method for generating a surrogate primary key. See, before we step into this, what it is all about, I think all of you understand that how we have generated a surrogate primary key yesterday. So if you go back to our implementation mapping, dim supplier 2, let's say the dim supplier 2, oops, sorry. So dim supplier 2. So if you see the dim supplier 2 mapping, if you see the surrogate primary key, we have generated using a sequence generator. Now I'm going to show you the method without using a sequence generator. How can we do that? And that is going to be the new thing. So let me do this one. So sequence generator. So how we are going to implement it? So here, so far we haven't talked about in the mapping designer. You have seen only how to use a source analyzer, how to use a target designer, and how to use a mapping designer. We haven't touched this tab, transformation developer tab, and what is the use of it. So basically, whenever, suppose let's say there is a lookup transformation, and this lookup transformation is used in some 10 to 15 mappings which I am using, only the single lookup transformation. So instead of recreating every time in the 15 mappings, you can develop in the transformation developer, which becomes a reusable. So this reusable transformation, I can use it anywhere. So what is the use of transformation developer? Whenever you want to develop the reusable transformations, then we are going to use this transformation developer. Here, for generating the surrogate primary key value, I'm going to define one lookup. And which it is going to be reusable, and using this lookup we'll start generating the surrogate primary key value. So I'm creating a lookup for generating a maximum primary key. So I'm going to name that as lookup get max pk. So this lookup, why I am creating, basically to this lookup I'm going to give the table name, and this lookup will give me the maximum value of the column, maximum value of the surrogate primary key column, whichever the table. So if I pass certain table name and the column name to it, so it basically gives me what is the maximum value which is available in that column. Okay, so for that I'm going to create a lookup. It's more like an unconnected lookup, you can call. It's more like an unconnected lookup. So how are you going to create? Let's say, so go to the transformation, click on create. Let's say select it, and you're going to call it as a lookup, so which I call it as get max pk. So concentrate here, there is a lot of concept which is involved in this. Okay, so click on create. So see, my table name changes every time, right? So if I'm going to reuse this lookup, my table name changes every time. So you can just use some dummy table name, it doesn't matter. So any dummy table name you can select it. Let's say ODS product itself. Let's take it, not a problem. So what I'm going to do, since it is anyway it's a dummy, I'm going to remove all the columns. I'm not going to keep any of the columns from that. So I'm going to add two columns. One is going to be the input value. So this is the value that I'm going to pass to my lookup. So which I call it as in_val. So this is going to be the big integer. So because it's going to be this, and this is an input, and this one I call this as a max pk. So this is going to be the big integer, and this is your lookup port, and let's say the return port is also, you can select that. So what is the condition that I'm going to write? So I'll come back to the condition later. So here in the properties tab, I'm going to write a source qualifier query. So this plays a crucial role in your unconnected lookup. See here, what I'm going to write is, suppose let's say you take the dim supplier 2 itself. Okay, So whenever I pass this table name as an input, it should give me the maximum value of the surrogate primary key. If there is no record, it should return me 0. So that is my requirement. Okay. So now I'll write this condition. Let's say select NVL of, I'm going to use a NVL function. Let's say it's going to be the supplier PK. So if there is a null value which is returned from this, then it has to fetch that value. So otherwise we'll use something like this. Okay. This is an appropriate method. I'll first fetch the maximum value of supplier primary key. If it is null, I'm going to replace that with a 0. Okay. So from, what is your table name? See, basically in my dim supplier 2 table, I'll alias this as a max PK. I'm aliasing this as a max PK. So if I try to do this, the maximum value which is available is 101. So it will give me 101, right? So there are two scenarios, right? A table can have the data, table might not have the data. So there are two scenarios which you have to understand. Okay, two scenarios. Scenario 1, table has a data. So when the table has data, it should give us a maximum PK value. So when the table has a data. Scenario 2, table does not have the data. Table doesn't have the data, so doesn't have the data, so then it should return basically 0. Basically it should return 0 for me. So first condition is working fine, right? So let's say this is your condition, and second condition, to test that, what I'll do is I'll just remove the data from this. So truncate table, let's say I'm removing the data, which means table does not have a data. So what it should give for me? It should give me 0. That's fine. So when the table doesn't have a data, it is returning me the 0 value. That means for scenario 1 and scenario 2, it's working fine. See, one more very, very important thing is, whenever you're writing a lookup override, suppose let's say if you are using the expression something like this, okay, the alias what you are going to provide should be same as your port name. If the port name and the alias name what you are providing is different, your lookup will never succeed. It doesn't work like your source qualifier. In your source qualifier, what it does, it basically assigns the values based on the position. It doesn't look for a name. But in case of a lookup, it will look for a name. So that's why this name plays an important role. See, when you go and see, I have defined it as a max PK. So the alias what you're going to provide is matters. So I need only this column from the lookup. Okay. What is the condition that you're going to define? See, your lookup SQL override is going to either give 0 or some maximum value, something like 101. So what would be the condition? A condition is going to be, I'll write the condition as max PK value is greater than input value. Why I'm using greater than here? See, it all depends upon whether my lookup returns the data or not. It depends upon the input value which I'm going to pass. It is returning me the maximum value, but if I pass the input value, different input value, it is not going to return me. So I'll tell you why we are using this greater than operator here. Okay. So max PK is greater than input value. See, you know that your lookup is going to return either 0 or some value as 101. So what would be the best value that I can pass to my input value when I'm invoking? Yes, it's going to be -1. So if I pass -1, zero is always greater than -1, and whatever the value it will return, that is always be -1. So here, whenever I'm invoking a lookup, so I'm going to pass this input value as -1. Whenever I pass -1, then only it will return a data for me, and I can make use of that max PK value for my surrogate primary key population. So there is so much concept involved in this. Okay, so you need to understand why we are using this and why I have used a greater than condition here. So I'm going to pass the input value as a -1 to fetch the data. So here one more important thing that you have to know is to invoke the lookup. To invoke the lookup, pass the input value as -1. All right. So you're going to pass the -1 from this. Now what I'm going to do, this I'm going to call it from this. So for now we have created a reusable transformation which will give us a maximum primary key value which is there in a surrogate primary key. It doesn't matter basically when you are defining it, right? So this you can just replace it by some dummy table name. So I call this as lookup table, and this you can replace it by the $. You can even parameterize this. So let's say which you can call it as $, lookup column, whatever. So this is a lookup table and that's going to be the lookup column. It doesn't matter what table you are passing here. Basically it will fire this query, right? Whatever the value that you pass, that's going to be taken care. Now we have this. See here, whatever the reusable transformation that you have created, that transformation is appearing over here. Okay, this can be reused anywhere now. Okay, now for generating the surrogate primary key value, I'm going to redo this lab. Hard-coded value? No, they cannot pass. See, the question is like, can we pass the -1 directly here? No, it doesn't allow you to do that. It's always a lookup as no, but yeah, it is not allowed here. And now I'm going to redo this lab for generating the surrogate primary key value. So what should I do? I'll take this backup. Okay, so let's say dim supplier to sequence without sequence generator. So that is what is our lab, right? So sequence generator. Now what I'll do for populating the surrogate primary key value, I'm going to remove this. This is no more. I don't require this at all. Now in order to populate this, what I do is I'll just drag and drop your reusable transformation which I have developed. So just drag and drop. So it's going to be an unconnected lookup. So how are you going to call the unconnected lookup? From the expression, right? So I need to call this unconnected lookup now for generating it. Here what I'll do is, so for generating a supplier primary key, so what I'll do is I'll create one variable port. Okay, so this concentrate here. Okay, so here I'm going to call it as a vSupplier PK, and this is going to be my variable port. All right, so I define one variable port here, and I have this one as a vSupplier PK. Now what I'm going to do here, when you edit it, we all know that for a variable port, always the first, for a first record when you are processing for a variable port, it is going to be value as 0. Okay, so this is where your logic is crucial. Okay, so if vSupplier PK is equal to 0, if it is equal to 0, that means you are processing the first record. When you are processing the first record, go and fetch the value from the database. So what is the value that is available in your database? That value. So how are you going to fetch? It's going to be the unconnected lookup. So I'm going to call this lookup :lkp dot lkp underscore get max pk. And what would be the value that you're going to pass? Whenever you invoke the lookup, always you'll pass -1 only, because you don't know whether it will return a data or not. So when you pass the -1, whether it might return a 0 or it might return a value. So your next value should start, if it returns a 0, it should start from 1. If it returns 101, it should start from 102. So I'm going to use it as +1. If it returns a 0, it will start populating the surrogate primary key value from 1. If it returns 101, it will start from 102. Okay, so that is what the first record value which it is going to be. If you're processing a second record, means vSupplier PK is not equal to 0, then what I'm going to do, I'm just increment that value by 1, vSupplier PK by 1. So what it will do, let's say first record it will generate 1, from the next record onwards this else block will get executed. Your lookup, how many times it will get invoked? only for a first record it will get invoked. It will not touch your database at all after the first record. So that means you are making only one call to the database to find out the maximum value of your surrogate primary key column. So now you do it. So just validate the data, and now this value it will be returned. So just pass this supplier PK value, which is going to be an output port, and I'll assign this value as this. Now what it is doing, you're actually populating the supplier PK value directly to this, and you're populating the supplier PK from here. So it's all depend upon the variable port how you are initializing. Now we are using an unconnected lookup. Is unconnected lookup is retrieving the data from dim supplier 2? No. So you need to override this SQL override. So now this I'm going to use it as dim supplier 2. And what is the column name? It's nothing but your supplier PK, right? So this I'm going to stamp it as a supplier PK. Now which query will be fired whenever I run it? So whatever the query that you have included in the unconnected lookup, that query will be fired to your database. So save it. Now what we have done is we have created one unconnected reusable transformation, and that I'm always invoking from the expression transformation. So this will try to run it and test it. So for testing this you need to verify a lot of things. Okay, so go to generate the workflow. Let's say generate with a reusable session. So now let me disconnect and reconnect it for so let's say you have the sequence generator. This is a one. I'm not sure whether it's a reusable session. So let me assign the connections. Instead of recreating the entire thing, I'm just taking the same example and then showing you how it can be generated. So SCD input is going to be your OLTP source, and dim supplier 2, it's going to be the target underscore Karthik, and this is going to be the target underscore Karthik, and this one is dim supplier 2. So now I think it should be the normal mode. I don't think we have an index, but still I'm just changing it. Okay, save this. Now how your testing approach is going to be. Okay, so the first run, so you need to check for a scenario 2 when the table doesn't have a data, whether it is started populating from 1 to the maximum value or not. Okay, now if I run it, since my target table doesn't have any data, it should start populating the values from 1. So if you see the surrogate primary key value, it should start from 1. So start the workflow. Now go to your workflow monitor and check. This is a 1. Okay, it's failed. So let's check it. Why? What is the reason? And okay, see what is the problem is I didn't provide the connection for unconnected lookup. So if you go and check, see here, best thing is that when I go and check for a log, it's saying that there is no log at all. In these kind of scenarios, you need to go and look for a workflow log. So go for a workflow log and sort it by the severity. It's clearly saying this here. See, cannot identify the unique relational connection or an application connection that is used as $source or a $target for a lookup or a stored procedure transformation. That means there is a problem with the lookup connection. So go here and go here, edit it, go to the mapping. So let's say for this it is pointing as a $target. What is the meaning of $target? It doesn't have any connection. So wherever your target table is available, surrogate primary key. So just assign that connection, apply it, and click on OK. Now it should populate with this. So let me restart it and check. So 15 out of 15. We are least bothered about how many are inserting and how many are updating. All we are interested in identifying whether my surrogate primary key value is populated or not, 15. So the next record should start from 16. So how would I make sure that? So what I'll do is I'll just go and update this from KL to, let's say, TN. So if I update one record in this, so definitely there will be a new record which will get inserted, right? So if the new record will get inserted, it should stamp as a 16. It should stamp as a 16. So what is the maximum value that is available? 15. 15 plus 1, it's going to be 16. So let's run this, right? Now go and check whether your DIM supplier 2. This is a value which is being populated. That means your unconnected lookup, whatever you have created, that the reusable transformation what you have created is working fine. So it is generating the maximum primary key value plus 1 if the table has a data. If the table doesn't have a data, it has started populating from 1. So these two scenarios we have tested now. So only two scenarios, right? So this is how you're going to make a reusable transformation. I mean, in this example, what are the things that we have learned? So one thing is that how to generate the surrogate primary key. How to generate the surrogate primary key without using sequence. So that is one thing. And we have also learned the another thing, that is how to create a reusable transformation. We have seen, so creation of reusable transformation. Now anywhere, wherever you want to generate the surrogate primary key value, you don't need to use a sequence generator. Always just drag and drop this and invoke that from the expression. That's it. So it will take care of this. So this is the most efficient method compared to your sequence generator transformation. Why? Because you're making a call to only once to the database. You're not calling for every record that you're updating, right? So this is the most efficient method, and it is a very best practice that to populate the surrogate primary key method. So you don't need to use a sequence generator at all for avoiding the performance issues. So that completes your sequence generator transformation and how you generate the sequence. So we have seen what is a reusable transformation and how to use a variable ports in the expression one more time. So this completes another lab, how to use a sequence generator without using a sequence. I mean, how to generate a sequence numbers. All right. So any questions please here? Yeah. Okay. So if you're using a set max variable, okay, so most of the people doesn't know what is a set max variable. Probably we'll discuss in the next class. I mean, even if you go by the set max variable, we'll go for incremental loads. We'll see that how we go by set max variable. And if your question is that is it the set max variable approach? No, absolutely not. All right. So that completes. Yes, go ahead, please. Okay. Can you show it once? Where did you pass the table name to reusable lookup transformation? Yes. So where I did is I just went to lookup, edited the lookup, go to the properties. When you edit the properties, here I passed it from table name, and then I replaced the column name as well. So earlier it was $$ lookup table, and it's just a dummy thing which I kept there. Yes, Sujata, go ahead with your question, please. Can we generate a sequence value without a sequence? That is what we have seen now. So in the sense, without using an Oracle sequence, yes. So we are not using any Oracle query here. So we are not
No,
using even.
no, Karthik, actually, no, it's not for Informatica question. Like any Oracle is just PL/SQL code only. Can we
Okay.
generate any sequential
Yes,
value? It
yes,
is not.
you can do that just by using a incremented counter variable. If you are using a procedure, you can just first fetch the maximum value of the primary key column and then use the incremental counter in the for loop and then keep on incrementing it till you
With
populate that data.
SQL query, is it possible? SQL query only.
SQL query, if you just want to generate, you can use a row number. Suppose let's say if you just want to populate this column, I just want to generate a sequence number, so just use a row number, comma, let's say if you want to generate row number comma d dot star. So try to use it, it generates in the SQL query. It's just a dynamic number. It's not an inbuilt number what it is there. It's a pseudo column and you can just generate with row number. There is row number column, you can use it. I mean it's a pseudo column. It's dynamically it will generate it.
Okay, okay.
Row number.
Okay. We can use row number. But row ID you cannot use, right?
Row ID is an alphanumeric. It's a physical address of the column which it is stored in the database. Row ID you cannot use it. So if you see the row ID is an alphanumeric one. It's a physical address where your row is stored. It is it is stored. Row ID is an alphanumeric one. So this is how it looks. This is not number.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Karthik. Thank you.
So that's pretty much we have about the slowly changing dimensions and how to generate a sequence value by using that. So probably I'll stop it for today because we have a lot of things to, I mean, you have a lot of things to practice. Probably maybe on the other day I'll try to stretch more for understanding this. Okay, tomorrow we'll talk about these things, how to use how to load the data into star schema dimensions and how to do the error logging at the session level, and if time permits we'll go by the fact load, and maybe we can take up the stored procedure transformation. We'll see. So probably you can brush up what is a PL/SQL, basic PL/SQL, and all those things. And if you want to just brush up simple basic PL/SQL